Hi everyone, welcome to this edition of History with Sai. In this video, I want to talk about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. For over 2,000 years, they've captured the imagination, been celebrated as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and classical Greek and Roman writers just couldn't stop raving about them. The first to mention the gardens was Berossus, a Babylonian priest writing in Greek, who attributed them to the powerful king Nebuchadnezzar II. He said that they were built for his Median wife, Amytis, because she missed the green hills of her homeland of Media in western Iran. Around 280 BC, he wrote Babyloniaca, a work explaining Babylonian history and culture to the Greeks, who at the time knew little about Babylon's long past. Dedicated to the Seleucid king, Antiochus I, the work itself has not survived, though later authors, particularly Josephus, quoted from it regularly. Regarding the gardens, he tells us the following. At his palace, he had knolls made of stone, which he shaped like mountains and planted with all kinds of trees. Furthermore, he had a so-called pensile paradise planted because his wife, who came from Media, longed for such, which was the custom in her homeland. Within this palace, he erected lofty stone terraces, in which he closely reproduced mountain scenery, completing the resemblance by planting them with all manner of trees and constructing the so-called hanging garden, because his wife, having been brought up in Media, had a passion for mountain surroundings. Writing in the 1st century BC, the historian Diodorus Siculus provided a detailed architectural account of the gardens, describing their terraced, mountain-like structure and advanced irrigation system. There was also, besides the Acropolis, the Hanging Garden, as it is called, which was built not by Semiramis, but by a later Syrian king to please one of his concubines. For she, they say, being a Persian by race, and longing for the meadows of her mountains, asked the king to imitate, through the artifice of a planted garden, the distinctive landscape of Persia. The park extended for plethora on each side, and since the approach to the garden sloped like a hillside, and the several parts of the structure rose from one another, tier on tier, the appearance of the whole resembled that of a theater. When the ascending terraces had been built, there had been constructed beneath them galleries which carried the entire weight of the planted garden and rose, little by little, one above the other, along the approach. And the uppermost gallery, which was 50 cubits high, bore the highest surface of the park, which was made level with the circuit wall of the battlements of the city. Furthermore, the walls, which had been constructed at great expense, were 22 feet thick, while the passageway between each 2 walls was 10 feet wide. Other writers pretty much said the same thing. But here's the great mystery. As of now, no Babylonian inscription, cuneiform document, or archaeological discovery has ever confirmed the existence of anything resembling the Hanging Gardens. All references to them come from Greek and Roman writers, and not from Babylon itself. And arguably, the most famous ancient Greek traveler and historian of all, Herodotus, who of those just mentioned lived closest to the time of Nebuchadnezzar II, never even mentions them in his monumental work, Histories. It's almost as if Berossus, Strabo, Diodorus, and the others were talking about a completely different city. Perhaps they were. The silence of Babylon's own records has led some scholars to suggest that the Hanging Gardens might not have been in Babylon at all, but rather somewhere to the north in what was once ancient Assyria. After all, many Assyrian kings are known to have loved gardens. The Assyrian king, Ashurnasirpal II, who reigned from 883 to 859 BC, records in one inscription how he established royal gardens at his new capital of Kalhu, and filled them with various species acquired during his military campaigns. He claims that canal water came flowing down from above through the gardens. The paths are full of scent. The waterfalls sparkle like the stars of heaven in the garden of pleasure. The pomegranate trees, which are clothed with clusters of fruit like vines, enrich continuously in the garden of joys like a squirrel. But if there's one Assyrian king who would have ordered the construction of such a wonder, it would have been Sennacherib, who reigned over Mesopotamia, including Babylon, between the years 705 and 681 BC. He's especially noted for his passion for botany and for creating a vast garden at Nineveh stocked with rare and exotic plants, herbs, and trees, some said to have been imported from as far away as India. To sustain these gardens, he engineered major waterworks, including damming the river Kosar and constructing aqueducts, the remains of which still survive. In his royal annals, he tells us, "Nineveh, the great metropolis, my royal abode, whose site since days of old the kings, my fathers, had not enlarged, and whose adornment they had not undertaken. At this time, I, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, first among all princes, who from the rising sun to the setting sun, with waters from the canals which I had caused to be dug, supplied Nineveh, together with its neighborhood. Gardens, vineyards, all kinds of products of the mountains, the fruits of all lands I planted." In another inscription, he states, "To be an object of wonder for all the people, I raised the superstructure of the entire palace. I called it the Palace Without Rival. I planted alongside it a botanical garden, a replica of Mount Amanus, which has all kinds of aromatic plants and fruit trees, trees that are the mainstay of the mountains and Chaldea collected inside it." Could this be a reference to the famous Hanging Gardens, which, thus far, have eluded us? It's possible that such a wonder did exist in Nineveh, since it was during Sennacherib's, and later his son, Ashurbanipal's day, perhaps the most magnificent city in the world. But if so, it would have been long gone by the time Berossus wrote about it some 300 years later. While it's tempting to identify Nineveh with the fabled Hanging Gardens, especially given Sennacherib's love of engineering and elaborate gardens, there are serious problems with this theory. By the time the Greek authors began writing about the gardens, Nineveh was a memory, not a living city. The Assyrian capital was utterly destroyed in 612 BC, when the Babylonians, Medes, and their Scythian allies sacked it. Ancient accounts describe its devastation, and archaeology confirms the scale of destruction. Unlike Babylon, which continued to thrive and impress visitors into the Persian and Hellenistic periods, Nineveh never recovered from this catastrophe. This timeline matters. Berossus, the earliest source to describe the gardens, attributes them to Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon. His account is centuries after Nineveh's fall, yet he presents the gardens as a visible and remembered wonder tied to Babylon's living tradition, and not the ruins of what was by then a destroyed Assyrian city. Later writers, such as Diodorus, Strabo, and the others, also associate the gardens with Babylon, not Nineveh. Nineveh's gardens may have been magnificent, but they were destroyed too early to be the basis for the detailed accounts of the Hanging Gardens preserved by classical authors. Except for Berossus, none of the classical authors who describe the Hanging Gardens are known to have actually visited Babylon. Their accounts are second-hand, or even third-hand, and often filtered through Alexander the Great's soldiers and lost works, like Clartarchus's History of Alexander. Perhaps with each retelling of the story, the legend of the Hanging Gardens became even more far-fetched until it truly became a wonder of the world, at least in our imagination. As for archaeology, the first large-scale excavations at Babylon were led by German archaeologist Robert Koldewey from 1899 to 1917. During his work, he uncovered Nebuchadnezzar II's palaces, the famous Ishtar Gate, and many of the city's monumental structures. Among his most intriguing finds was a massive stone-built, vaulted structure with thick walls, unusual for Babylon, where mud brick was the norm. It also contained what looked like irrigation channels and a deep well. Because of these features, Koldewey concluded that he discovered the foundations of the legendary Hanging Gardens. At the time, his announcement was celebrated throughout the archaeological community as solving the mystery of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. However, later scholars questioned this interpretation, suggesting the structure may have been part of a palace storeroom or water system rather than a garden. Still, Koldewey's discovery remains one of the most compelling archaeological candidates ever put forward for the Hanging Gardens. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'd also like to thank the channel's patrons for making videos like this possible. These include, but are certainly not limited to, GrandKick69, Yop de Graaf, Pasta Frola, Michael Lewis, Daniel Allen, Danny Van Eck, WenXTV, Robert Morgan, Strobex, Frank, Tim Lane, Sebastian Otaro Correa, Michael Trudell, Leader Titan, Micah G, John Scarberry, Andrew Bomer, Connor Dolson, Krish, David R, Stephen Ball, Gabes, Monty Grimes, Franz Robbins, Cyrus Smear, Diane Astra, Nimrod Nir, Hypnosan, Brendan Redman, Faridun Dadashanji, Jimmy Daruwala, Enahida Debu, Sherkam, Farhad Kama, and all of the channel's patrons on Patreon for helping to support this and all future content. Check out the benefits to being a Patreon member, and if you'd like to join, feel free to click the link in the video description. You can also follow History with Sai on Instagram, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter, as well as continue to listen to special audio programs on the History with Sai podcast. Thanks again, and stay safe.